welcome to Reimagine 14, our university edition. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. And if not, welcome back and thanks for tuning back in. We've interviewed over 600 projects, teams, and thought leaders in the space. And the goal of our virtual conference is to educate and inform everybody, including those who might be new to the crypto space, longtime holders, and industry professionals. So make sure to subscribe below to keep staying informed and enjoy what we have for you in store today. And today joining us, we have Mr. Scott Kominers, a professor of business administration in the entrepreneurial management unit at Harvard, as well as a faculty affiliate of both the Department of Economics and Center of Mathematical Sciences and Applications there. He's also a research economist at the National Bureau of Economic Research and an A16 crypto research partner. With what's going on economically in the world, especially recently, the timing couldn't be more perfect. Welcome, Scott. We're excited to have you. How are you doing today?
Thanks. I'm great. I'm really excited to be joining you.
All right. Before we move on into introducing the student panelists and my co-hosts, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into crypto.
Sure. So I'm an economist by training, and I work in a field called market design. That is sort of the branch of economics that uses economic theory and analysis to build practical solutions to real world problems. And in that context, I've been studying marketplace businesses and various market clearing mechanisms and transaction technologies, essentially since the days of my PhD or even a little bit before. And so I've been aware of crypto and blockchain technology for a very long time. One of my undergraduate and then graduate advisors was an early Bitcoin miner, right? I've been aware of the sort of growing and emerging technology space, and I've been interested in it from a market design perspective for its potential to enable new types of transactions. Interestingly, and we won't spend too much time in the intro, I started out as a major skeptic. And a lot of early applications were sort of trying to decentralize things in ways where the decentralization was not adding real value to the application and was very, very costly, right? Like to an economist, you're like, wait, institutions are useful. There's a reason like lots of organizations are centralized. There's a reason for government institutions. But over time, as the applications of the space have matured, I really became convinced first of the ideas of around decentralized transaction infrastructure. And my friend and frequent collaborator Christian Catalini, roped me into a project on that with the sort of early market design questions around Libra, later called Diem. And then, especially of late, I've been fascinated by consumer crypto technology, sort of the opportunity to do things like establish new forms of property rights through non-fungible tokens, or improved incentive alignment between platform users and creators through the allocation of token shares. All of this sort of really is market design, exactly as we sort of intended in the field, right? It's sort of using these new technologies to create better incentive systems that improve markets.
Well, it should be exciting to discuss today, because I do agree that there are a lot of exciting, especially economic and macroeconomic applications that could entail. But like I mentioned before, this is our university edition, and our focus in this edition of our virtual conference series was to invite student blockchain partners to come ask questions and discuss groundbreaking new technologies with some of the most influential thought and business leaders in the industry. So in that vein, our company MouseBelt has been working with more than 80 student blockchain organizations from universities spanning multiple continents, providing support in a variety of ways, from internships, office hours, sponsorships, as well as early stage project investment. So today I have joining us for our discussion, alongside special guests, Max Mohammadi from Cal Poly Blockchain Club and Brian Eide from University of Minnesota Blockchain Club. I'm happy for you to join us today. Before we move into the interview, could y'all both tell us a little bit about your club, maybe how many members, and maybe the breakdown of the members and the activities that your club has planned, maybe for the coming year, and maybe some stuff that y'all have done. So why don't we throw it over to Max first over at Cal Poly.
Yeah, totally. So I'm Max. I go to Cal Poly. I'm a right now I'm not actually the leader of our blockchain club, but I was last year, and this year I'm just the co-president slash treasurer. And what we do is really like, going back to what you said about like, the breakdown of our students and what we do, I'd say we have maybe about 80-90% computer science students, 10% finance students or accounting students, or maybe some other type of engineering. And pretty much what we're focused on, like, every time we have a meeting or every time we, have some cool new project idea is centered around DeFi. We're really interested in DeFi. Um, and then there's a lot of also like, just like developer tooling, right? Like how to use hard hat, how to use like truffle, even how to learn like a new programming language for smart contracts like Rust or Move. um, and there's so much stuff in crypto right now where it's getting overwhelming to kind of like teach all of our students different things. So at this point we're kind of like going to different hackathons together, and just coming up with projects on the fly and trying to either stick with them ourselves or sort of pass those hackathon ideas along to other students for them to work on.
Really, really cool. Yeah. Sounds like there's a long runway out there at Cal Poly. So why don't we shoot over to Brian here in Minnesota?
Yeah, hey, I'm Brian Eide. I'm the co-president of the UMN Blockchain Club. So our club has mainly been education focused. We host weekly meetings where we give a presentation on a certain topic, because we have a lot of members that are like really new to blockchain. They're just curious. They stop by just to really learn stuff. But other activities that we get involved in are hackathons. Right now, we are about to start a trading competition. And what excites me about blockchain technology is that really allows really like unfettered access to like financial systems. And I think that DeFi is just really great.
Definitely, absolutely. I do agree. All right, so we'll move on to the questions. I think that we had scripted out that we were going to start in Minnesota, but I started out there with the introductions. So we'll go right on. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. We'll go back to Minnesota. I'm so sorry. Since we started out at Cal Poly. Yeah. Not on it this morning. I need my coffee.
So the weather is very similar in the two places, so it's like easy to get them mixed up.
Oh,
I feel like the weather's about kind of the same across the whole country right now, but alas. Well, yeah, we'll start with Brian out in Minnesota. Yeah, you can go ahead, go first.
yeah. Hey, Scott. I was wondering if you could tell us about what you do at Harvard Business School. I was looking at your website and you have a lot of things going on, so I'm just curious about what you do in the business school.
Sure. Right. First of all, perhaps the primary thing I do, right? Like I'm a scholar and a teacher. And so I spend a lot of time like sort of thinking about, new ideas and trying to understand like, general frameworks for market design, as well as like very, very specific applications and implementations. And then, perhaps the most important thing I do, sort of pedagogically, is figure out how to extract from those, general frameworks, right? Like things like how do we clear different types of markets, or like how do you think about token incentive design? How do I turn that into something that is teachable? And then I teach a marketplace design class jointly with a couple of my colleagues. I'm building out our new like Web3 sort of curricular suite. And then I spend a lot of time advising students, at every sort of age and level, like everyone from undergrads to, and PhD students on various research topics to, MBAs or executives who are launching new companies. And then, there's a fair amount of public writing and outreach as well. Writing opinion articles or public explainers, and I do a lot of that also jointly, in my position at A16Z Crypto. So it's really about sort of trying to understand, what are the important market design trends and concepts, and like, how can we understand them better, and then how can we teach them to, to practitioners, to individuals, to students, and to the world. I don't know if that was too abstract an answer. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. That opens up a lot to talk about. So are you involved in a Harvard Blockchain Club or?
So there are several different blockchain clubs around Harvard. I've taught, some various senior officers from several of them in different contexts. And the business school one, I believe I am one of only 2 people in the Discord that has the special Discord role of professor.
Okay.
So yes, so I've done some amount of engagement with our undergrad club, with the business schools blockchain club, and they work very closely in tandem with each other as well. And then there are other various blockchain initiatives across campus. I'm part of our new crypto, fintech, and Web3 lab. I don't remember the order of the sequence. It's like something like fintech, crypto, Web3, crypto, fintech, Web3, Web3, fintech, crypto, whatever, the lab that works on that. And then, also to the extent that we have sort of policy, sort of like more policy focused, like, I just recently started advising a student who's at the Kennedy School and working on blockchain. Harvard is a very decentralized, sort of like, set of research nodes, and we're trying to tie the crypto and Web3 stuff together over the past couple, or we've been trying to do that over the past couple of years.
Yeah. So have you been advising much research into crypto?
Yeah, indeed. Both in the context of my class, and then in the context of sort of like independent student projects and things that I advise at different levels of, everything from like someone shows up in your office for comments once to like, I have a regular research group that meets every week.
Wow, that's really cool. So your class teaches Web3 concepts?
Yeah, both of them actually. So I teach a PhD course on market design, Economics 2099. And then I teach an MBA course called Making Markets, that's about marketplace businesses. And this past year, I debuted a whole bunch of Web3 content in both. The MBA course, we actually had like a 2-week sort of focus module on it, which included the what I believe is the first HBS case on NFTs. We did a case study on the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which also I believe, I don't know this with certainty, but I suspect we were the first class to give out an NFT. So everybody, as part of that class session, had to create a crypto wallet if they didn't already have one, and sort of experience, sort of what it is to like, have a self-custodial wallet structure. Obviously, we weren't making them trade or anything, but we did sort of get them to go through the process and read some of the security documents and stuff. And then, at the end, we gave everyone a POAP from, said Making Markets is boring. Featuring an ape someone kindly agreed to let us include, or 2 people actually, we have 2 different apes that people kindly agreed to let us include. Then we talked about vampire attacks in LooksRare versus OpenSea, another new case study there. Metaverse land, forgetting some of the other topics. In general, the idea was to sort of both expose students to the concept of digital assets and the Web3 design framework, and then to think about like, okay, in a Web3 world, how does entrepreneurship change? How do these sort of pressures and incentives on the business change? How do you think about your platform's interaction with your participants? Sort of what's the change in the incentive design primarily?
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, I think it's really cool that you're looking into these like new case studies from Web3, like the Looks Rare and OpenSea, like that kind of stuff. Like Web3 really opens up a lot of like unique, just like things, because people are just experimenting with things and like these, like marketplace economics kind of stuff is just like naturally happening out there in the wild, and you just watch it unfold in like a nascent industry. So yeah, that's really cool.
Exactly, it's so exciting. Sorry to cut you off.
No. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what your role for the NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research, what that entails, and then maybe we could go back to Max out in Cal Poly.
I mean, the NBER connection is actually much simpler. The NBER is just is an organization that brings together lots of different economists and sort of supports and hosts the research. And so I first became involved. I've been attending conferences and such at the NBER for years. I think actually since I was in undergrad, maybe. But I was involved in a series of projects on non-practicing entity patent litigation, which were in part sponsored by a grant through the end that was sort of grant from the NSF that was managed by the NBER. And so everyone affiliated with that project became affiliates.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, we'll go with Max in in California.
Yeah, Scott, I wanted to ask you a little bit of a question bouncing off what Brian said, or what you said in response to Brian's question. And that's pretty much like, what's the most common kind of reaction or question that a lot of your students get when you're teaching them about this initial idea of like self-custody? Because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand that. They're like, oh, well, all of my assets are like held in this wallet, but really like your assets are held on the blockchain, and then the wallet is just an interface for that. So how do you kind of, like what are the most common reactions and questions?
It's a great question. So, and you're pointing to exactly the fundamental tension, right? Like at the one hand, these blockchains are public, so they're public infrastructure, right? They're like, just like the servers that route the internet. These are just sort of like public platforms that are out there and that like anyone can read and interface with. On the other hand, you need that interface, and like consumers are used to thinking of their individual interface, right? Your account on a bank website or on Facebook or something as being an account on a platform rather than, sort of a portal to view something on public infrastructure. And so one thing I'm trying to teach is that distinction, right? Like, your wallet is, sort of, it's like a view frame, right? Like, the information is like stored on this infrastructure layer, and this is the way you interface with and make changes to what's stored on that layer. And then the other thing is that, it's sort of like a closer, like a lower level of aggregation than you're usually, than most of my students are used to working on, right? Like usually they're, working with an account on an intermediary that like, is itself like sort of like many layers secured. And so, if you lose your password or whatever, maybe they can email you a new one, or worst case scenario, like, you have to like go to an office in person and show an ID or something of the sort, but you're not interacting with the storage technology directly. Whereas, when you're using your crypto wallet, you in fact are the one who is interacting with the storage technology, right? There isn't really like an intermediary buffer layer. You're just using a tool to interact. And so, I think it led to really interesting discussions. People were saying, this is surreal. Like, I can't imagine having, $1,000 like under my mattress. And this is basically like having $1,000 under your mattress, except it's on a computer that maybe somebody could take over. And so then we started talking about hardware wallets, but all of this is like, self-custody is not something most people are in, rather, I don't know if I can claim most, many people are not used to self-custody as a mode of financial technology interaction. Or of other sort of account information, sort of either, right? Like, you don't really have self-custody over your Facebook profile or the information you've stored on some cloud server. You do on your computer. But if you have like something that's like really like really important and secure, you're probably storing it in a fashion where like some intermediary that's really optimized to manage security is doing so. And so, it frames a really interesting conversation about like, how ready is this technology for consumer prime time, and where is the right sort of middle ground? Is it that the wallet technology should become more custodial and sort of take over some of those security roles for the user, or should users learn to like, be better at self-custody and like more careful with password type information and almost like even reach a point where they demand that level of like low level, close to the infrastructure control. And so, we had an open conversation about it, and students had a wide range of different views about what the market optimum was. But of course, as a footnote, that's actually like, good from a market perspective, right? One of the advantages of blockchains is because they're open technology infrastructure standards, you can actually have every point on that spectrum, right? Like at scale, there could be custodial and non-custodial wallets. And that alone is like an incredibly powerful change from the way these sorts of, accounts, sort of other like value storage systems or information storage systems have operated beforehand.
Yeah. I've heard sometimes people talk about that revolution necessarily at the infrastructure level. Maybe it's something called triple entry accounting, and then we'll go back with Mr. Brennan.
So I'm actually not familiar with this term, but probably. Why don't you can you tell us a bit about it? I haven't heard it either.
Oh, okay. So the way how I understand it, I'm sorry.
No, you're
I'm
fine.
going to get the answer to this question eventually. Is I've heard much tell of traditional double entry accounting, right? The triple entry is that the blockchain is immutable. So once there's something on the blockchain, we can no longer administrate a fraudulent, double entry, because double entry accounting is still rife with fraud. So, however, I guess we still have yet to know if that is just something that somebody said on a podcast once. So the day will come. The day will come.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we actually don't know. It's a really good question. Like, I think we don't know what the equilibrium level of like additional transaction record security is going to be, because the market will also the more immutable you make something, the more the market is going to sort of like innovate in the way that information is used and interfaced with. So we may see like sort of like an accounting layer that sits on top of the settlement layer or something like that still faces those types of challenges. But I think in general that's right? Like one of the big advantages of the immutability or effective immutability of blockchain transactions is that they reduce the need for an intermediary to maintain the sort of security of the the trust really in the execution of the transaction, which means you have like many more degrees of freedom on the types of people and entities you can transact with. So I think basically like that's right, but there certainly is still going to be sort of as this stuff again becomes more mainstream and reaches broader consumer applications, I don't know like how much is going to live at an intermediary layer versus a settlement layer in equilibrium. Just like with exchanges, right? A lot of those transactions are settled every so often.
It makes sense to me. All right, we'll go back to Minnesota, Mr. Brian.
Yeah, I was wondering, what is an A16Z crypto research partner, and like, what do you do for A16Z exactly?
Cool. Well, so A16Z crypto research partners are very new. This is a new, division that they launched this year. So A16Z crypto is the crypto. Maybe division is the wrong word. It's a new branch. I don't know the official designation, but A16Z crypto is the part of Andreessen Horowitz that invests in and sort of helps build crypto startups and related companies. The research division that they've launched is about sort of trying to understand the fundamental intellectual challenges at the core of crypto. At every layer of the stack, right? Everything from like the fundamental technology that manages blockchains to like higher level like layers and settlement solutions, all the way up to like consumer applications and token incentive designs for individual like platforms and products. And what's really interesting about crypto, even relative to many other areas of technology, is that almost every crypto product or platform has some fundamental intellectual question at its core, whether it's like, how can you compress this amount of data and do it in a way that is secure enough to to not be cost prohibitive to run on a decentralized server, to how do we align the I've said this, I've said version of this a bunch of times already today, but like how do we actually like make it so that the users and the platform and perhaps even two sides of users on a two-sided platform all share sort of the same incentive to have the platform flourish and can benefit from it in a way that is sort of secure from an incentive perspective against various forms of attacks, say on governance actions and so forth. And so a lot of these questions have similar structure. And so there's a real advantage to sort of bringing together a bunch of researchers to try and think about them and sort of crack them together. And so we do a lot of that. We're sort of trying to like solve, fundamental foundational research questions in blockchain, crypto, and Web3. We also do some amount of advising companies as they're sort of like, wrestling with individual such challenges, sort of their token design or some component of their infrastructure. And then, we also, as just like in my role at HBS, we do a lot of teaching, right? We produce a lot of content that explain, and just like MouseBelt, like, we produce a lot of content that explains Maps Paint. Sorry, that's my like favorite children's book, MouseBelt. Do you know this children's book, by the way? I feel so silly.
I don't think so. No, I don't
okay,
think so.
I'll send you a copy. You send me your address afterwards.
Oh, okay, definitely.
That is the funniest I really apologize for the organizational misnomer, but that is the funniest organizational misnomer. Sorry. By the way, in a stage show, like in a play, when like one of the actors just starts laughing or like cracking up so much that they can't say their lines. It's called corpsing. He's like, you died on stage. So here I am corpsing, like over thinking about mouse paint. But anyhow, same like same teaching role, right? We do a lot of communication and both like, trying to provide, general frameworks for how do you think about governance? Like, how do you understand like zero knowledge proofs? Like, and again, also like trying to get to like the levels of details that are useful for builders to actually build stuff, right? Like, how do you make auctions work on chain? And then even up to and including like, we might, as a research team jointly with A16Z's engineering team and stuff, release open source implementations and examples that people can use and build upon sort of as sort of core illustrations of some of the, some of the different approaches we're pushing.
Yeah, any notable Web3 apps that you've advised?
Sure. So I currently advise. So I've done lots of various like office hours these things, or like sort of like light advising. I also don't know whether I can speak to the specific companies I've advised under the auspices, under the auspices of A16Z. So I'm going to talk about the ones that I advise outside. I advise Kudos, which is it's a Web3, and the founder is one of my former students and a very good friend and frequent co-author, Jad Esper. And it's a platform that enables people to build sort of a collection of wrapped content, if you will, sort of like finding things that like really sort of inspire them or are meaningful to them, and like aggregating them into a profile of NFTs that you can sort of think of as like your dorm room wall like posters, except like when you move and you take all the posters with you, like here, same thing, right? You're like, it's an individualized identity that you can take with you across platforms, as opposed to the way you might build a collection on Instagram or something where it sort of lives inside the platform. And it's very much about sort of sharing things like a song, for example, that you like really loved. You wrap it in some additional content that sort of like, explains or illustrates why you loved it so much. And then it's sort of a piece of memory for you that you can share with others. I also advise Find Digital, which is an NFT marketplace, the NFT/metaverse marketplace platform that has launched a couple of different projects and is about trying to understand how to use how do you explain this? It's about trying to understand how to use sort of like various like generative infrastructure to build coherent metaverse spaces and metaverse assets that could be brought across various different platforms. And then I advise a couple of NFT projects like Thingdoms and Hungry Wolves. I can even probably put on, do I have one of these in backgrounds? Let's see here.
Lots of NFTs.
So this is one of the Thingdoms samples that they and here we go. Here is my thing.
What's the mint price?
They minted last December. I don't remember. I think it was at 0.1. But they're still available at OpenSea. But for avoidance of doubt, this is not an investment recommendation or financial advice. I myself advise the team and have a bunch of them. Full disclosure, and the most fun part of the Discord is the dance floor channel, which is public. So if you want to like get a sense of the Thingdoms community and tune in to our their various podcasts and things, all of that's like, fully public. So no, not token gated, not required.
That's fun. So what like aspect did you advise? Is it like I'll just leave that open.
Sure. I mean, I advise on various different things. Sometimes, some of it is just like, basic, um, some of it is like basic, like sort of entrepreneurial tactics. How do you think about like, finding product market fit and thinking about like, you know, who your target market is and how to interact with various changes in the surrounding crypto market and stuff. But a lot of it is much more specific. It's, thinking about Hungry Wolves, for example, has, a series of game mechanics. Like, so your wolves get airdropped sheep, you then eat the sheep to gain dominance, and then you can challenge other wolves by like basically like putting up dominance in a competition. And the founder Adam Hollander and I spent a lot of time thinking about like how do you make this game balanced and fun to play, but also not too not too complicated, and most critically, how do you make it so that all of the tokens work together well, right? That like there's an incentive to collect and to sort of like engage with the game mechanics, but it's not so imbalanced that if you have, that if you happen to be a whale who has like 100 of the wolves, like you're just always going to win every competition. There's a team aspect. How do you sort of like make it so that the individual level competitions and the team competitions are complementary rather than substitutable, or even worse, like sort of at opposition? Similarly, I might help a team think about like, how do you, how do you do your initial, how do you like structure your initial token sale, or how do you plan like how the tokens that you're distributing are going to gradually map into different forms of utility? What are those forms of utility? How do you keep the market, the sort of economy inside of your platform or project stable? Right? Like a lot of projects will release a token with, for example, like a constant fixed emission schedule, and then either overshoot or undershoot the sort of token money supply in whatever utility they're doing, right? Like either their arcade games are going to be sort of too expensive in the token or too cheap. And in one circumstance, in sort of in either circumstance, your like token economy might fail, right? So in one, the token becomes too scarce, and then people are suddenly like unwilling to use it because they're worried it might become super valuable. And as a result, like nobody plays your game and the system fails. And in the other, maybe like the token is like so, abundant, that it has sort of like no perceived market value. But even worse, like it's possible to acquire so much of it that you can just sort of like wipe through the game and like, sort of not, there's no leveling, there's no progression, just like some whale like, plays through the whole thing, collects all the prizes, and it's over. And so, thinking about like those sort of like, you almost call them like microeconomic decisions about like your game macro, your token macroeconomy or something, is often a place where, thinking with some game theory or a little bit of, sort of economic design is useful. And then of course, also there's like questions about governance and things. It's like, as your token is moving, into a direction like, that grants some degree of control over the ecosystem. Again, how do you make sure that governance is balanced? How do you incentivize participation? And how do you sort of make it something that is net positive, and again, that generates the correct type of user engagement and investment in the platform's future?
That's cool. Wow.
I do think that a big problem with the Web3 and gaming NFTs is that microeconomic impacting the macro. Why don't we go back out to California and Max? If you guys
Yeah, I have another question to kind of bounce off the same topic, and it's, you see a lot of like protocol designers or people that are doing like DeFi or NFTs or gaming. They try to take this approach of like, let's do whatever we can to make sure people lock in their tokens, or let's do whatever we can to make sure people don't just sell off their tokens at once. So let's have a vesting schedule. Let's have, let's have like airdrops. Let's have, different emissions for liquidity mining, all this stuff. And then you have like all of this Olympus DAO, Ohm fork stuff where people are obsessed with, solving this problem of like, how do we keep the liquidity inside our platform? And it's getting to the point where it's like, you know, how do we just take more and more advantage, but there's no actual like intellectualization of like these market dynamics and like what's actually beneficial for all participants. So do you have any thoughts on like the future of different types of tokens? And I know there's like, Brian had a question about soulbound tokens. I know there's like a little bit of that in there.
Oh, totally. Well, I mean, certainly just like, you know, as a side note on soulbound tokens / non-transferable tokens, I think there's certainly a role for those, and you know, and a greater role than we apply today, right? Like, you know, not that they haven't been used, right? MIT has been giving out crypto coded, you know, sort of soulbound, like, you know, blockchain diplomas for years at this point. I saw Iris raised, yeah, like, I don't even remember what chain it's on, like, but I think they've been doing it for maybe like 6 years, something. Like it's been a long time. They started doing it experimentally and then just kept doing it. And like, you know, the potential for using various non-fungible reputation tokens or information tokens, I think is really, really powerful, especially as, you know, more and more of our digital identities start becoming, you know, sort of, I don't know, centralized is an ironic choice of word, but I mean like centralized in our individual crypto wallets, right? Like instead of having a dispersed identity across 20 different platforms, you know, my expectation is that, you know, 10 years, even 5 years from now, like most of our digital identity is going to live sort of in, you know, in a crypto wallet or similar, like, you know, sort of piece of infrastructure that or a piece of like, infrastructure access / storage, right? Like, you know, it's stored in a way that we control and then take and plug into all the different platforms rather than sort of plugging the platforms into each other. And so for that, like, you know, there's going to be I think a huge amount of need for various, like, you know, historical accomplishments and attestations and sort of just pieces of your identity and personality to be able to live in these digital formats. And a lot of that will happen with non-transferable tokens rather than transferable tokens. Like not all of it, right? Like PFPs, you know, will still be transferable and people might still swap them around and stuff. Although there might also be non-transferable ones, right? Maybe like, you know, one day like Harvard will give all of their graduating students like a Harvard alum PFP that like has themselves and like a cool piece of information about themselves that they could use at reunions or something. I don't know. And so there's a huge space for that. And again, like all of this together, like to the extent that your crypto wallet becomes sort of the, you know, the center of your digital identity, being able to transfer off-chain information like your academic degrees or your work history or something is going to be really important. You know, because a lot of like interviewing and negotiation and stuff like goes on through resumes or through like looking at your affinity networks and stuff like that. And we're going to need ways of bringing that on chain, and it's going to want to be non-transferable, right? If you see somebody, actually Chad and I wrote an article about this, like if a reputation token is transferable, often that reduces its reputation value, right? If the undergraduate diploma tokens become transferable, then you don't know whether anybody who's holding one of them actually has the diploma, and that could be a bit of a problem. All of that said, it's sort of, to me, that's a little bit like separate from the question of how will tokenomics evolve in the transferable token world, like the question you were asking about, like how do you build like DeFi platforms or DAOs or something that really do have aligned incentives. And you know, the jury is still out in this, right? Like these are like people are experimenting with these sorts of challenges today and like, you know, and in real time. But for me, from the perspective of market design, it's really a lot about thinking about what is the value creating outcome you're trying to achieve, right? Like a lot of tokens have the failure mode that people think that the token gaining value is the end unto itself. where in fact, like that's not the end unto itself. Usually, I mean, like maybe if like you're selling like a piece of like fine art that's you know, sort of the ownership of which is attached to the token, then like really like, you know, the art, you know, sort of, you know, gaining value might be part of the point. But really it's about the art, it's about the image gaining value, or the music gaining value or something. Even that, it's not really about the token itself going up in value. And certainly in these like platforms where the token is, you know, sort of, you know, an access code, or access pass, or like a, you know, an arcade access token or something like this, like the value doesn't want to be, you know, the users, you don't want the users of the token to think of the value as coming from the token itself being valuable, but rather from the thing that it enables you to do, or that it plugs into or connects to or represents being valuable. And so, you know, the first thing is there has to be a clear path from, you know, or you know, clear line of sight from the token and its use and its incentive design to whatever that like positive value creating outcome is, right? If there isn't a like a real like, you know, net positive value outcome at the end, then the token doesn't really do anything, right? People might perceive it as valuable temporarily because, you know, it's there, it's interesting, something, but it's not actually like creating value in the world. And if it's not doing that, it is itself like sort of not really like, you know, doesn't really have an underlying value. And then, you know, you have to think very hard about how the token will be used, how it will be collected and held. And there are, you know, as I was saying earlier, like there are tensions, right? Like, and it's often very application specific. So like I have lots of conversations with founders who want to release a token that is essentially an arcade token. That's sort of a you know, a unit of account that they give out to holders maybe of their primary asset. Like they have an NFT that has a game world attached to it, and they want to give out arcade tokens for the game world. And you know, they often think, and to some degree, like at the moment, you know, markets might even be judging them on like, you know, the price of the token. They're thinking like, we want this token to be high cost because you know, that's what the market has signaled. They're going to judge the value off the price of the token. But that like makes no sense, right? Like if if your arcade token is so expensive that like it's better held as like an investment asset, no one's going to play your game. No one, your game is not going to become popular. And then like, you know, in the end, the thing that you were doing that was creating value, you know, is sort of never actually going to get off the ground. And so you sort of have to like, you know, convince them that like, no, actually like this token should be pretty abundant. And maybe even you should have a way of controlling its abundance, right? Like a lot of times people will decide like the token just has like some fixed emission schedule or fixed growth or fixed maximum level or something, where none of that is what you want. What you actually care about is how does the supply of the token relate to people's demand to play the game? Like, you know, if you're, you know, running a, you know, an arcade at a boardwalk or something, they don't like hold a, you know, like limit the number of tokens total. They like, you know, sort of roughly distribute a number of tokens equal to the number of people who showed up and put quarters in the machine that gives them tokens. And like, sure, a few of them get lost, and so they get some extra quarters, and like, you know, maybe some people get to play some games for free, and like, but on average, like the token supply at like, you know, the beach boardwalk is proportional to the number of people who are there playing games. Same thing here, right? Like, you know, maybe you want your token design to, you know, your token supply to flex, like your games are going to suck it in, you're going to distribute it out, and you can change the ways in which it's distributed to try and balance participation and supply. And so you have conversations like that. You sort of think like, okay, what is the goal of this token? The goal of the token is to enable people to play these arcade games and to sort of make it, you know, a limited enough access that people have to think about like how often or when they're going to play, but unlimited enough access that anyone who wants to play can pretty much whenever they want to. And then suddenly you arrive at these like, you know, supply strategies that are very different from what a lot of projects use today. So I think, so I sort of gave answer by like a handful of examples, but the sort of summary is I think the way we see these tokens evolve is going to, you know, be very like much driven by the individual applications. And again, like remember most of the applications of various like token models haven't yet been invented, or at least like, we've never seen at scale, right? Like, I talk all the time about NFT ticketing. I think like in, 10 years, like pretty much every digital ticket will be an NFT. And like today, like virtually none of them are. So there's like a big, space to evolve between here and that equilibrium. But I think like we're going to see like various token frameworks that are mapped to different applications and use cases, and always deriving from what that end state use case is. Like, where does the actual value to, the outcome value come from, and then how do you drive that back into the right token design?
It does seem to me like there's a general layman expectation of a perfect centralized planned economy in a perfectly decentralized environment, and I don't know that that's above my pay grade. But
yeah,
we'll
that's
go with,
pretty difficult.
No, yeah, absolutely. We'll go with Mr. Eide back in Minnesota for one last question here. I think we've got enough time.
Yeah, so going off what you were saying about like NFT ticketing, I was thinking about how we've seen digital collectibles onboard many people to Web3,
Yeah.
but they're so speculative, and like I think this causes like a lot of detractors, and people are like anti-NFT because of I don't know, like the pop culture significance, and like how like like NFTs are seen as like these celebrities own them, and they're just like, I don't know, a bubble, and all those kinds of things that people say, and all that. And I was wondering what you think, like the use case or what use cases of NFTs will have the most success in mainstream society.
Great question. So I don't know how to rank most, but I'll tell you some applications that I think are likely to have a lot of success in mainstream society, and I have no idea which ones will be like the most successful by scale. First of all, I think digital collectibles will be a mainstream successful use case, but it won't look like the current NFT collectibles market very much, right? You think about like, collectibles, remember, is a $300 billion market, something like that. I mean, it's a huge global market in collectibles, but most collectibles are not like, $150 to $1,500, like, whatever's, right? They're not like, $250 ducks or something. They're like Pokemon cards, or they're like, souvenirs from travel. And those things usually have market prices in the like 20 cents to $20 range. And so I think there will be widespread digital collectibles in the forms of NFTs, but the mass market version of that is not going to be like, 10,000 or even 100,000, PFP projects or whatever. They're going to be, things you buy in expansion packs, like collectible cards, or souvenirs you buy when you go somewhere, right? Like, maybe souvenir shops will have a like, NFT you could get by scanning a QR code and paying $5 or something. And so I think that is very real. It's just going to be like a very different format from what we're seeing today as the main market. The ticketing thing I think is huge. One of the reasons I like that one, again, and that's like I don't know, digital tickets is something like a $20-30 billion market, I think. One of the reasons I really like the ticketing application is because for tickets, NFTs just seem like such a superior technology to a QR code in your email, right? The QR codes have all sorts of problems. They're hard to resell because people can't trust that you haven't resold it to 5 other people. They have no physicality. You can't like really print it out and put it on your wall. It both is ugly and it doesn't really like represent the event in a meaningful way. And it's really, really hard to solve the initial pricing problem, because there's this massive, for popular events, there's this massive secondary market. And NFTs sort of solve all of this at once, right? Like, even if you sell it below market clearing prices initially, you can set them up so that royalties, sort of continue to accrue back to the artist and venue and so forth. There's a unique asset. So like, people know that if you buy it from them, they haven't sold it to, if you buy it from someone, that person hasn't also sold it to 5 other people, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to transfer it to you. And like, in many ways, like they are physical again, and they make it possible for artists or sports teams or whatever to continue engaging with their fans by like looking at who has them in their wallet and maybe airdropping things to someone who saw early concerts or whatever. So NFT tickets, I think, are a great example, because like lots and lots of people go to at least one event that has digital ticketing. And like, this is just like, I think, a strictly superior technology. So we'll see many events switching over to it. I also think like the information use case, like we were talking earlier, like, soulbound diploma tokens and things, like, I think that's going to be very powerful. right? Like even just for the simplicity of having all of this stuff stored in one place rather than having to enter it on LinkedIn and Facebook and like, 20 other platforms is really valuable, right? Like being able for that to be like digital data that you control and you can just like attach to a platform, and have it like read and interpret, like it's incredible. I mean, like so many applications that are just like starting to build like sort of like history of your time in crypto type like digital resumes. It's shown like the power of like running processing on people's like chain identity data, and so I think a lot of that will be mainstream as well. And again, that will be like campuses are giving everyone a digital diploma, and for that they'll have to pick a standard and people will get crypto wallets and things. And once you have the wallet, you can start interfacing with other systems and solutions. I definitely think the gaming application is big. And again, that's like something that's like sort of live right now already, right? Like we've already had lots of marketplaces inside of games or sort of built around games, and crypto is just like, in many cases, it's a much more robust solution for doing precisely that. But I mean, these are all applications where it's really easy to see the path directly, right? Like there's an established real world problem that like we already know we have a suboptimal solution for, and like, sort of tokens are addressing it. Even just like, sort of simple like creator platforms and rewards, right? Like, people being able to give their like fans on YouTube or TikTok or something like, an asset that is actually like, real without having to like mail everybody like a print of your artwork or something, right? These are all places where we already have the problem and we know it's there, and like just, NFTs are a really good sort of efficient solution. Membership subscriptions, right? Like maybe there will be like a newspaper subscription where you can subscribe to your favorite sports team news everywhere on the internet, and you own that subscription, and you can just plug it in, plug your crypto wallet into like any newspaper website, and it'll just like unlock that content for you instead of having to somehow manage like a cross-platform paywall. I think that the most exciting space are the applications we can't even imagine yet, right? Like new types of property rights, new ways of doing exchanges. Like, we're sort of, people ask me all the time, like, is this really just like, a digital art and collectible and, whatever market? And my answer was always like, it has always been, no, not at all. But those are applications where we already knew we had a market failure. It's hard to sell digital goods without a way to uniquely define ownership. And so this is a direct and very simple like first application for the technology. The real question, and this is what I suggest like you guys and others who are listening to this, right? The question, the next question is, of course, what are the like next level market failures that you wouldn't have even noticed until you had a technological solution like this, and what can we do there?
Definitely, the dream of RSS feeds is still alive with NFTs.
Absolutely, never forget.
Yeah, I'm still on that train, but there's a long runway ahead, and I want to thank my co-hosts, Mr. Brian Eide from Minnesota, as well as Max Mohammadi out at Cal Poly from coming out, but most of all, Mr. Scott Kominers, professor of business administration out at Harvard, as well as an A16Z crypto research partner. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you guys. This was such an honor, and it's so great to meet both of you. And like Brian, Max, like sort of, you guys are like building the future, right? Like this is like what I'm so excited about. And I should say, sorry, I know I'm like interrupting the sign off, but like the greatest honor of being a teacher is that you get to sort of work with students who, constantly like drive you to become excited about new things and like sort of push you to like learn more and think harder and then go on to like build the future. And like you guys are doing that, right? Like you're clearly like super sharp, totally up on all this stuff, like really, really great questions. It's been such a pleasure to have a conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you build, and I hope you'll stay in touch.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very
much. We should get our
much.
clubs connected. Maybe you can
get
our clubs.
I'd be incredibly honored. We should totally do it.
Yeah, y'all connect. Y'all reach out. Okay, we'll get everybody their emails if they don't.
But thank you, Miguel, for signing this up.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well,
awesome.
it's above my pay grade too. So I thank you, whoever's watching the recording too. Thanks,
Miguel, thank you
Thank
so much for
Aurora.
hosting. This was
All
awesome.
right.
And
Y'all have a great
talk
day.
soon.
Yeah.